This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The caravan stretched out like a serpent, winding its way through the sea of golden grass. Wagon wheels creaked and groaned under the weight of their precious cargo, a constant reminder of the journey's toll. The lowing of cattle mingled with the soft rustling of the prairie, creating a symphony of frontier life. Ishmael's weathered face was set in grim determination as he surveyed the horizon. The merciless sun beat down upon them, sweat trickling down his brow and stinging his eyes. Beside him, his wife Esther tended to their children, her movements efficient despite the exhaustion etched on her face. Their eldest son Asa rode ahead, his keen eyes searching for any obstacles in their path. Among the travelers was Ellen Wade, a young woman whose eyes held secrets as vast as the prairie itself. She kept to herself, her gaze often fixed on the distant horizon, as if searching for something, or someone, beyond the endless expanse of grass. "Pa, there's a ravine up ahead!" Asa's voice carried over the rumble of wagon wheels, snapping Ishmael out of his thoughts. The group approached the steep descent cautiously, the wagons creaking ominously as they navigated the treacherous slope. Esther's hands gripped the side of the wagon tightly, her knuckles white with tension. She glanced at her younger children, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Ellen sat quietly beside her, her usual reserve replaced by a flicker of concern. As they reached the bottom of the ravine, a dense thicket loomed before them. Ishmael's voice rang out, firm and authoritative. "Asa, take the axe and clear a path. We can't risk the wagons getting caught up in this mess." The sound of metal striking wood echoed across the landscape, startling a flock of birds into flight. The younger Bush children scrambled to help, gathering the cut branches and clearing the way. Ellen found herself joining in, her hands soon rough and scratched from the work. Days blended into one another, each bringing new challenges. One morning they awoke to dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, and soon fat droplets began to fall. Within minutes, the gentle shower transformed into a raging thunderstorm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the terrified faces of the travelers. Thunder rolled across the prairie like the angry roar of some great beast. Esther hurried to secure loose items in the wagons, while Ishmael shouted orders above the howling wind. Ellen, usually quiet and reserved, found herself helping the younger children into the shelter of the wagons. As she lifted a small girl, their eyes met, and Ellen felt a sudden warmth in her chest. For a moment, she wasn't an outsider, but part of something larger. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a world washed clean. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings, but their relief was short-lived as new dangers emerged from the shadows of the prairie. One evening, as the group settled around the campfire, a chilling howl pierced the night. Wolves. Ishmael and Asa grabbed their rifles, forming a protective circle around the camp. The livestock grew restless, sensing the predators lurking just beyond the firelight. Ellen found herself standing shoulder to shoulder with Esther, both women armed with whatever they could find, a frying pan, a pitchfork. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, filled with snarls and the occasional crack of a rifle. As dawn broke, the wolves retreated, leaving behind a shaken but unharmed group of travelers. Ishmael's face was etched with fatigue, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. "We press on," he declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. And so they did, day after grueling day. They forded rivers, the water tugging at wagon wheels and threatening to sweep away their precious possessions. They endured scorching heat that left their throats parched and their spirits flagging. Through it all, Esther worked tirelessly, cooking meals over smoky campfires and mending clothes torn by the harsh journey. Ellen watched it all with quiet intensity, her own story a mystery that tugged at the edges of the group's consciousness. She found herself drawn into the rhythms of their life, helping with chores and offering a comforting presence to the younger children. As they ventured deeper into the frontier, the landscape began to change. Rolling hills gave way to rocky outcroppings and the grass grew sparser. Each day brought new uncertainties, new tests of their resolve and resourcefulness. Ishmael pushed them relentlessly forward, his eyes fixed on a future only he could see. The Bush children, once full of excitement for the journey, now moved with the weary determination of seasoned travelers. Even Asa, strong and capable, showed signs of strain as he managed the daily challenges of leading the convoy. Yet beneath the exhaustion and hardship, a quiet strength began to emerge. They were no longer just a group of emigrants, but a community forged by shared trials and triumphs. As the sun set on another day of their journey, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, the travelers gathered around the campfire. Stories were shared, laughter rang out, and for a moment, the vast, unfamiliar wilderness felt a little less daunting. But as night fell and silence settled over the camp, each member of the group was acutely aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges and uncertainties. The frontier stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, promising both peril and possibility in equal measure. As the first light of dawn began to creep across the sky, Ellen awoke with a start. Something felt different, a tension in the air that set her nerves on edge. She peered out from beneath the wagon cover, her eyes widening at the sight before her. The prairie, once a sea of golden grass, now stretched out before them as an endless expanse of sun-baked earth. The heat shimmered in the distance, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage. As the rest of the camp began to stir, a single thought echoed through Ellen's mind. How long could they survive in this merciless wasteland? The sun beat down mercilessly on the small caravan as it inched across the endless sea of grass. Wagon wheels creaked and groaned under the weight of their precious cargo, while the steady rhythm of hoofbeats marked time like a metronome. The air was thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and wildflowers, a heady perfume that seemed to grow stronger with each passing mile. It was into this scene of quiet determination that Dr. Obed Bat, also known as Dr. Battius, burst like a whirlwind. Ishmael Bush's brother-in-law arrived with all the subtlety of a thunderclap, his arms laden with an assortment of scientific equipment that clinked and clattered with each enthusiastic step. The self-proclaimed naturalist's eyes sparkled with unbridled excitement behind his spectacles as he surveyed the endless expanse before him. "My dear family," he exclaimed, his voice quivering with barely contained glee. "What wonders await us in this untamed wilderness?" The other travelers exchanged bemused glances as Dr. Battius began unpacking his collection of specimen jars, notebooks, and an oversized magnifying glass that caught the sun's rays, sending prism-like reflections dancing across the prairie. As the group adjusted to their new companion's presence, another figure emerged from the shimmering horizon. Natty Bumppo, known as the Old Man of the Prairie, approached with the quiet grace of a seasoned predator. His weathered face, etched with lines like the very landscape surrounding them, spoke of a lifetime of hard-earned wisdom. The contrast between the two newcomers couldn't have been starker. While Dr. Battius flitted about like a hummingbird, chattering excitedly about every plant and insect he encountered, Natty's presence was as steady and reassuring as an ancient oak. His eyes, sharp despite his advanced years, seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings with a single glance. As the days wore on, Natty's expertise became invaluable to the group. With patience born of years on the frontier, he taught them to read the land like a book. Under his guidance, they learned to spot the telltale signs of nearby game, to distinguish between edible plants and their poisonous lookalikes, and to interpret the subtle shifts in wind and cloud that heralded changes in weather. One particularly challenging day found the group facing a treacherous stretch of terrain. The wagons groaned and creaked as they navigated the uneven ground, threatening to overturn at any moment. Natty, his movements as sure as a mountain goat's, led them through the obstacle course of hidden pitfalls and deceptive inclines. "See how the grass bends there?" he called out, his voice carrying easily over the prairie wind. "That's where the ground dips. Keep to the left, and you'll find firmer footing." The travelers followed his instructions, their hearts pounding as they navigated the dangerous path. The air was thick with tension, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or the nervous whinny of a horse. As they emerged on the other side, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the group. As night fell, Natty demonstrated how to construct shelters that would protect them from the elements far better than their previous attempts. The Bush family, initially wary of the stranger, found themselves gravitating towards his quiet strength and seemingly endless well of knowledge. Ellen Wade, in particular, was drawn to the old trapper like a moth to a flame. During rest periods, she would seek him out, her eyes wide with wonder as he regaled her with tales of life on the frontier. His stories painted vivid pictures of a world both beautiful and dangerous, filled with untold possibilities. "Tell me about the time you faced down that grizzly bear, Mr. Bumppo," she would beg, hanging on his every word. Natty's eyes would twinkle with amusement as he obliged, his rough voice softening as he spun his yarns. "Well, Miss Ellen, it was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where you can smell winter on the wind." As Ellen's fascination with Natty grew, so did Ishmael's unease. The patriarch of the Bush family watched with growing concern as the old trapper's influence spread through the group like ripples on a pond. Where once his word had been law, now he found his decisions questioned, his authority subtly undermined. Tension simmered beneath the surface of their interactions, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Ishmael's jaw would clench whenever he saw his family members deferring to Natty's judgment, and his eyes would narrow as he watched the easy camaraderie between the old man and his young relative. As the group traveled together, the prairie itself seemed to mirror the shifting dynamics within their party. The landscape changed gradually, almost imperceptibly, from the familiar to the unknown. And just as the terrain became more challenging, so too did the relationships within the group grow more complex, fraught with unspoken rivalries and conflicting loyalties. Ishmael found himself caught in a silent struggle for control, his leadership challenged not by open defiance, but by the quiet deference shown to Natty Bumppo. As the sun set on another day of travel, casting long shadows across the prairie, Ishmael's concern about Natty's influence over his family and the other emigrants deepened, leading to subtle power struggles and tension within the party. The prairie wind whispered secrets as darkness fell, and the travelers settled into their makeshift camp for the night. Exhaustion weighed heavily on their bones, a testament to the grueling journey they had endured. Yet as they drifted off to sleep, none could have imagined the challenges that awaited them on the horizon. For in the vast expanse of the untamed wilderness, their resolve would soon be tested in ways they could never have anticipated, and the true nature of their expedition would be revealed in the harsh light of dawn. The group's journey across the prairie had been long and grueling. After weeks of arduous travel, their bodies ached for rest and their spirits yearned for respite. The vast expanse of golden grass swayed gently in the warm breeze, a sea of tranquility broken only by the occasional cry of a distant hawk. The sun beat down mercilessly, its heat shimmering off the horizon in waves that distorted the view of the endless plain. Ishmael Bush, his weathered face creased with determination, squinted against the glare as he surveyed the land. His keen eyes searched for a suitable spot to make camp, a temporary haven in this wild expanse. Finally, he spotted a small stream, its crystal-clear waters gurgling softly over smooth pebbles, a lifeline in the arid landscape. "Here," he declared, his voice gruff but tinged with relief. "This'll do us good. Water for us and the animals, and we can defend it if need be." The words galvanized the weary emigrants into action. Like a well-oiled machine, they sprang to life, their movements purposeful despite their exhaustion. Wagons creaked and groaned as they were maneuvered into a protective circle, forming a fortress of wood and canvas against the wild unknown. The air filled with the sounds of hammering and the rustling of canvas as sturdy tents rose like mushrooms after rain, offering precious shelter from the relentless prairie sun. Esther Bush, her apron already smudged with dirt, took charge of the kitchen area with the efficiency of a seasoned general. Her calloused hands, testament to years of hard work, deftly arranged stones for a fire pit. "We'll make do," she muttered, eyeing their dwindling food supplies with a mixture of concern and determination. Soon the aroma of a simple stew wafted through the camp, a comforting reminder of home in this alien landscape. The children, their faces a mix of excitement and trepidation, scurried about under Ace's watchful eye. Their laughter, like wind chimes in the prairie breeze, lightened the mood as they gathered firewood, dug latrines, and set up sleeping arrangements. Ace's stern voice occasionally rang out, guiding and correcting, but his eyes held a glimmer of pride at their industriousness. Dr. Batius, in stark contrast to the practical activities around him, was lost in a world of scientific wonder. His eyes gleamed with childlike enthusiasm as he darted from plant to plant, muttering Latin names and scribbling furiously in his notebook. More than once, Natty Bumppo had to call him back from wandering too far, his voice a mixture of amusement and exasperation. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Natty gathered the group around him. His leathery face, etched with the wisdom of the wilderness, was serious as he spoke. "The prairie may look peaceful," he warned, his voice low and gravelly, "but it's full of hidden dangers." With patient hands, he demonstrated how to construct simple alarms using twine and small bells, and showed them how to use the natural contours of the land to camouflage their presence. The camp settled into a rhythm as night fell, a small island of humanity in the vast ocean of grass. But beneath the surface of this seeming tranquility, currents of emotion and secrets swirled. Ellen Wade, her heart pounding like a drum, waited for her moment. When all eyes were turned away, she slipped into the shadows like a ghost, her feet barely making a sound on the soft earth. The cool night air caressed her flushed cheeks as she made her way to a predetermined spot, hidden from prying eyes. There, bathed in moonlight, stood Paul Hover. The young bee hunter's face lit up at the sight of her, his eyes reflecting the starry sky above. Their embrace was fierce and desperate, a stolen moment of passion in a world that seemed set against them. "I've missed you," Paul whispered, his voice husky with emotion. Ellen's reply was muffled against his chest, but the trembling of her shoulders spoke volumes. They spoke in hushed tones of their love, their dreams, and the obstacles they faced. The prairie night, vast and indifferent, kept their secrets. Unknown to the young lovers, they were not the only ones awake in the still of the night. Abiram White, Ellen's uncle, prowled the edges of the camp like a restless coyote. His eyes, glinting with an unsettling light, darted from shadow to shadow. When he approached Ishmael, their conversation was conducted in whispers, heads close together like conspirators. The tension in their postures and the furtive glances they cast around spoke of plans and motives hidden from the rest of the group, an undercurrent of potential conflict that threatened the fragile peace of their prairie sanctuary. As the night deepened, a sudden chill swept through the camp, carrying with it an inexplicable sense of foreboding. The prairie, once alive with the chirping of crickets and the rustle of grass, fell eerily silent. In the distance, a lone wolf howled, its mournful cry echoing across the vast expanse. The sentries on watch tightened their grip on their rifles, their eyes straining to pierce the gathering darkness. Something was coming, something that would shatter the fragile peace of their newfound sanctuary. Night descended upon the camp, its inky darkness swallowing the rugged terrain. Long shadows stretched across the land, transforming familiar shapes into eerie silhouettes. And in the depths of that darkness, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Night descended upon the camp, its inky darkness swallowing the rugged terrain. Long shadows stretched across the land, transforming familiar shapes into eerie silhouettes. The air grew thick with tension, a palpable unease settling over the travelers like a heavy blanket. The dying campfire sputtered and hissed, its feeble light barely piercing the gloom that enveloped them. Abiram White's eyes darted nervously from side to side, his movements furtive and predatory. He crept towards Ellen Wade's tent, his intentions as murky as the shadows that concealed him. The soft crunch of his footsteps on the dry earth seemed to echo in the stillness of the night. With a sudden, violent motion, Abiram burst into Ellen's tent. His rough hands grasped at her slender form, eliciting a terrified scream that shattered the night's silence. Ellen's cry pierced the air like a knife, a desperate plea for help that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. Paul Hover's heart leaped into his throat at the sound. Without a moment's hesitation, he sprang into action, his muscles coiled with tension as he raced towards Ellen's tent. The world around him blurred, his focus narrowed to a singular purpose: reaching Ellen. As Paul burst through the canvas flap, he collided with Abiram's solid form. The two men grappled fiercely, their struggle a chaotic dance of fists and fury. Grunts and curses filled the air as they fought, the confined space of the tent adding to the frenzied nature of their battle. The commotion spread through the camp like wildfire, rousing the slumbering travelers from their uneasy rest. Ishmael Bush emerged from his tent, his imposing frame silhouetted against the night sky, his face contorted with confusion and anger as he took in the scene before him. "What in tarnation is going on here?" Ishmael's thunderous voice boomed across the camp, momentarily freezing the combatants in place. With the strength of a bear, he forcibly separated Paul and Abiram, his grip like iron as he held them apart. Abiram, his plans in tatters, began to weave a web of lies. His words tumbled out in a desperate rush, accusing Paul of making unwanted advances towards Ellen. "I was just protecting her," he insisted, his eyes darting nervously between Ishmael and the others who had gathered around. But his lies rang hollow, as transparent as morning mist to many in the group. Doubt and suspicion began to creep into the minds of the travelers, fracturing the fragile bonds that had begun to form between them. Natty Bumppo observed the unfolding drama with keen interest, his weathered face creased with concern. His sharp mind worked to piece together the puzzle of relationships and hidden motives within the party. Each revelation added another layer to the complex tapestry of their journey, and he could sense that this incident was merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. The Bush family, once a united front, now found themselves divided. Ellen's presence among them, once accepted without question, became a source of tension and uncertainty. Esther Bush drew her children closer, her maternal instincts on high alert as she eyed Ellen with a mixture of concern and mistrust. Dr. Badius, more accustomed to the orderly world of scientific inquiry, found himself adrift in a sea of human emotion and deceit. His attempts at mediation fell flat, his words of reason drowned out by the cacophony of accusations and denials that filled the air. As the night wore on, an uneasy calm settled over the camp. The dying embers of the campfire cast flickering shadows across faces etched with worry and suspicion. Whispered conversations floated on the night air, carrying fragments of fears and secrets yet to be revealed. Each member of the group retreated into their own thoughts. The bonds of trust that had begun to form now strained to the breaking point. The incident had exposed the fault lines running through their makeshift community, setting the stage for conflicts yet to come. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, the travelers lay awake in their tents, each harboring their own suspicions and secrets. The whispered conversations and wary glances exchanged around the dying embers of the campfire spoke volumes about the changed dynamics within the group. Just as exhaustion began to overtake the weary travelers, a sudden buzz filled the air. Paul Hover, who had been restlessly pacing the perimeter of the camp, froze in his tracks. His eyes widened with excitement as he realized the source of the sound. Could it be? In the midst of all this turmoil, had he stumbled upon something that could change everything? The monotony of prairie life was suddenly shattered. Paul Hover, the skilled bee hunter, had discovered a large wild beehive nestled in a nearby cluster of trees. The news spread through the camp like a gust of wind across the endless grasslands. Weary faces lit up with hope, the promise of sweet honey a balm to their tired souls. The emigrants gathered, their eyes bright with anticipation, a stark contrast to the dull ache of hunger that had become their constant companion. Paul stood tall, his weathered face beaming with pride. The sun caught his hair, turning it to spun gold as he addressed the group. "Folks," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "we've got ourselves a treasure trove of nature's finest sweetness just waiting to be harvested." As Paul explained the intricacies of honey harvesting, Dr. Badius could barely contain himself. The doctor's spectacles glinted in the sunlight, his eyes wide with scientific fervor. "This is extraordinary," he exclaimed, practically vibrating with excitement. "A rare opportunity for close observation of API's mellifera in their natural habitat." Paul and Natty exchanged worried glances, the creases in their sun-weathered faces deepening. "Doc," Paul warned, his voice low and urgent, "I wouldn't get too close if I were you. These ain't your garden variety bees." But the doctor, drunk on the prospect of discovery, waved off their concerns and approached the hive. The air grew thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. Suddenly the world exploded into chaos. The angry buzz of disturbed bees filled the air, a deafening roar that sent shivers down spines. The camp erupted into pandemonium, people scattering like leaves in a whirlwind. Arms flailed wildly, swatting at the air as the insects attacked with furious determination. The bush children's excited giggles turned to shrieks of terror. Their cries pierced the air, a heart-wrenching sound that spurred the adults into frantic action. Ishmael, his face a mask of determination, grabbed a smoldering branch. "I'll smoke 'em out!" he bellowed, his voice barely audible above the chaos. Natty's eyes widened in alarm. "No!" he shouted, lunging forward with the agility of a much younger man. The dry prairie grass surrounding them was a tinderbox waiting to ignite. With lightning-fast reflexes, Natty knocked the branch from Ishmael's hand, averting a potential disaster. Amidst the mayhem, Ellen, Wade, and Paul moved with surprising grace. Their movements were synchronized, almost dance-like, as they collected honey from the less aggressive parts of the hive. Abiram White watched them from a distance, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, his gaze darting between the pair and the surrounding chaos. Esther Bush's voice rose above the din, a sharp counterpoint to the angry buzzing. "Ishmael Bush!" she screeched, her face red with exertion and anger. "What were you thinking, allowing such foolishness? We'll all be stung to death." As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the emigrants slowly gained the upper hand. Despite numerous stings and mishaps, they managed to harvest a significant amount of honey. The sweet smell of success mingled with the sharp scent of crushed grass and sweat. That evening, as they gathered around the flickering campfire, the taste of honey on their tongues was bittersweet. The day's events had provided a much-needed distraction from recent tensions, but it had also laid bare their inexperience. As they savored the fruits of their labor, a sobering realization settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Natty's weathered face was grave as he spoke, his voice low and measured. "We've been lucky today, folks, but luck won't always be on our side out here on the prairie. We need to be prepared for whatever comes our way." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The challenges of prairie life were far greater than they had anticipated, and they were woefully unprepared for the dangers that lay ahead on their journey. As the fire died down to embers, a new worry began to gnaw at the edges of their consciousness. The waterskins felt lighter, the liquid within sloshing ominously. Paul's brow furrowed as he lifted his to his lips, the meager trickle barely wetting his parched throat. He caught Natty's eye across the dying fire, a silent understanding passing between them. Tomorrow would bring a new challenge, one that could prove far more deadly than any swarm of bees. The group's water supply was running dangerously low. Panic began to set in among the emigrants as they faced the harsh reality of their situation. The vast, unforgiving prairie stretched out before them, a sea of golden grass rippling in the hot breeze. Parched throats and cracked lips were a common sight as the travelers huddled together, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of relief. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Sweat trickled down faces and backs, clothes clinging uncomfortably to skin. The sound of dry, rustling grass seemed to mock their thirst, a constant reminder of the water they so desperately needed. It was in this moment of desperation that Natty Bumppo, the seasoned frontiersman, stepped forward. His weathered face was etched with determination, eyes narrowed against the glare of the sun. "We need to find water, and fast," Natty declared, his voice gravelly from thirst. "I'll lead a small party to search for a new source." Ishmael Bush, the group's leader, gave a curt nod. His usual air of confidence had been replaced by a tense, worried expression. With a handful of volunteers, Natty set out, each step kicking up small clouds of dust. As they trudged through the tall grass, Natty's keen eyes darted from side to side, taking in every detail of their surroundings. The volunteers followed in silence, the weight of their mission hanging heavy in the air. Suddenly, Natty held up a hand, signaling the group to stop. "Watch the birds," he instructed, pointing to a flock of sparrows flying overhead. The group followed their flight path, noticing how they dipped low on the horizon. A spark of hope ignited in their eyes. With renewed energy, they pressed on, following the birds' lead. The sound of trickling water soon reached their ears, a melody sweeter than any they had ever heard. Rounding a small hill, they discovered a hidden spring, its clear waters bubbling up from the ground. Cries of joy erupted from the search party as they rushed to the water's edge. The cool liquid felt like heaven on their parched lips and throats. Natty allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction before turning back to the others, his face serious once more. "We found our lifeline," he said, "but this is just the beginning of our challenges." As the group filled their canteens and water barrels, Natty took the opportunity to educate them about the dangers that lay ahead. His voice was low and serious as he spoke of the prairie's unpredictable nature. "The weather here can turn on a dime," he warned. "One moment, it's calm as can be, and the next you're in the middle of a storm that could blow a man right off his feet." He described the sudden squalls that could darken the sky in minutes, bringing with them driving rain and vicious winds. The emigrants listened with wide eyes, their earlier elation tempered by the gravity of Natty's words. Moving on, Natty's tone grew even more somber as he broached the subject of prairie fires. "A single spark can set the whole world ablaze out here," he said, his eyes reflecting the memory of flames he'd seen consume everything in their path. Kneeling down, Natty demonstrated how to create fire breaks, showing the group how to clear strips of land to halt the advance of flames. The emigrants watched intently, their hands mimicking his movements as they practiced the life-saving technique. As the day wore on, Natty's lessons continued. He spoke of the wildlife they might encounter, the howl of wolves in the night, the lumbering approach of a grizzly bear, the silent slither of venomous snakes through the grass. Each description painted a vivid picture of the dangers that lurked in the seemingly peaceful prairie. But it was when Natty turned to the subject of the Native American tribes that the atmosphere grew truly tense. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper as he explained the complex web of relationships between the Sioux, the Pawnee, and other tribes who called this land home. "This ain't just empty space we're crossing," Natty cautioned. "Every step we take, we're on someone else's hunting grounds. We need to tread carefully." The impact of Natty's words was clear on the faces of his listeners. Ishmael Bush's brow furrowed deeply as he contemplated how this new information would affect his plans for settlement. Dr. Batius, ever the scientist, leaned in eagerly, his mind already racing with the possibilities of studying these tribes. Natty noticed the gleam in the doctor's eye and shook his head slightly, disapproving of the idea of treating the natives as subjects for study. Off to the side, Ellen Wade and Paul Hover exchanged worried glances. The young couple's dreams of a new life together suddenly seemed fraught with unforeseen obstacles. Paul reached out and squeezed Ellen's hand, a silent promise that they would face whatever came together. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, the group gathered their filled water containers and prepared to return to camp. The mood was subdued, each person lost in their own thoughts about the challenges that lay ahead. The journey back was quiet, broken only by the rustle of grass beneath their feet and the occasional call of a distant bird. The vast expanse of the prairie, which had seemed so full of promise just days ago, now loomed around them like a beautiful but deadly trap. As they crested the final hill and the camp came into view, a collective sigh of relief passed through the group. They had found water, yes, but they had also found a new understanding of the world they were venturing into. Natty watched as the emigrants made their way back to their wagons and tents, their steps a little heavier, their eyes a little more wary. The vast prairie suddenly seemed more threatening than ever before, and a new sense of caution and vigilance settled over the camp like a heavy blanket. As night fell, an eerie calm descended upon the camp. The emigrants, exhausted from the day's events, retired to their tents early. Natty, ever vigilant, took the first watch. As he patrolled the perimeter, his keen ears picked up an unusual sound, the faint, distant lowing of cattle. But something wasn't right. The noise seemed to be moving, growing fainter by the minute. With a sudden jolt of realization, Natty sprinted towards the Bush family's wagon, his heart pounding. But it was too late. The damage had already been done, and a new crisis was about to unfold with the dawn. The Bush family awoke to a scene of chaos and dismay. A significant portion of their cattle had vanished during the night, stolen from right under their noses. The early morning air was thick with tension as Ishmael Bush surveyed the empty pasture. His face turned a deep shade of crimson, veins pulsing at his temples. His massive fists clenched and unclenched at his sides, barely containing the fury that threatened to explode like a powder keg. The vast prairie, which had seemed so full of promise just days before, now loomed around them like a green ocean hiding unseen dangers. "Mount up!" Ishmael's voice boomed across the camp, startling a flock of birds into flight. "We're going after those thieves!" As the men scrambled to obey, Natty Bumppo knelt in the trampled grass. His weathered hands, calloused from years in the wilderness, gently traced the faint impressions left behind. The old trapper's keen eyes picked out details invisible to the others. A bent blade here, a hoof print there. Rising slowly, joints creaking like old leather, he announced with grim certainty, "Sioux warriors, a group of them, move fast and quiet, like shadows in the night." A collective shudder ran through the group. The name Sioux carried with it a weight of fear and respect. Asa Bush, Ishmael's eldest son, stepped forward. His young face was set with determination, eyes burning with a mix of fear and excitement. "I'll scout ahead, Father," he volunteered, voice cracking slightly. "I can move quicker on my own." Ishmael nodded, a flicker of pride momentarily softening his hard features. As Asa disappeared into the vast expanse of the prairie, the search party set out, hope and anger fueling their steps. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly on the searchers. The grass whispered secrets they couldn't understand, and the horizon shimmered with false promises of water. Hours crawled by like molasses. The men returned empty-handed, their spirits as parched as their throats. Of Asa, there was no sign. As night fell, an uneasy quiet settled over the camp. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, full of unseen threats. Every rustle of grass sent hearts racing. Esther Bush's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, searching for any sign of her firstborn, her hands twisting her apron into knots. The first light of dawn brought not relief, but horror. A shout went up from the edge of the camp, and soon the air was filled with Esther's heart-wrenching wails. There, sprawled in the grass like a broken doll, lay Asa's body. His once strong form bore the marks of a violent struggle, and fatal wounds told the tale of his final moments. The discovery sent shockwaves through the group. Their anger over the cattle theft transformed into a potent mixture of grief and fear. Ishmael stood over his son's body, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes betrayed the storm raging within. Sorrow and rage battled for dominance. His voice, when he spoke, was low and dangerous. "I'll find who did this," he vowed, each word dripping with the promise of vengeance. As the day wore on, suspicions spread through the camp like wildfire. Accusatory glances darted between the emigrants. Some muttered darkly about the Sioux, while others cast doubtful looks at Natty Bumppo. His extensive knowledge of Native American ways, once valued, now made him a target of mistrust. Ellen Wade and Paul Hover found themselves under increased scrutiny. Their presence in the camp, once accepted, was now viewed through a lens of suspicion by the grieving family. They huddled together, acutely aware of the hostile glances thrown their way. Their whispered conversations cut short whenever anyone approached. Dr. Batius approached Asa's body with scientific detachment, his hands moving methodically as he examined the wounds. His clinical muttering about fascinating lacerations and remarkable contusions only served to heighten the tension. Esther's sobs turned to shrieks of outrage at his apparent lack of empathy. "Have you no heart, man?" she cried, her grief turning to fury. "That's my boy you're poking at." As the sun began its descent once more, the emigrants grappled with the harsh realities of their situation. The vast, unforgiving land stretched out around them, beautiful yet deadly. The concept of frontier justice, once an abstract notion, now loomed large and immediate. The day drew to a close with the camp caught in a maelstrom of emotions. Grief, fear, anger, and suspicion swirled together like storm clouds on the horizon. As darkness fell once more, the emigrants huddled close, acutely aware of their vulnerability in this vast, unforgiving land. Just as the last light faded from the sky, a commotion erupted at the edge of the camp. Shouts of alarm rang out, followed by the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Ishmael Bush grabbed his rifle, his face set in grim determination. "Form up!" he bellowed. "They're coming back!" The emigrants scrambled for weapons, hearts pounding. As the riders emerged from the gathering gloom, a collective gasp rippled through the group. These were no Sioux warriors, but something far more unexpected. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and gold. Long shadows stretched across the makeshift camp as the emigrants gathered for the frontier court. The air crackled with tension, thick and heavy, like the oppressive heat of a summer storm. Each person stood rigid, acutely aware of the gravity that weighed upon them all. At the center of the gathering stood Ishmael Bush, a mountain of a man now bent under the weight of his grief. His face, usually stern and unyielding, was a canvas of sorrow and barely contained rage. His eyes, red-rimmed and burning with fierce determination, swept across the crowd as he spoke. "We're here to find justice for my boy." Ishmael's voice boomed, silencing the whispers that rustled through the crowd like dry prairie grass. "And by God, we'll have it before the day is done." All eyes turned to Natty Bumppo, the old trapper who stood accused. Despite the weight of suspicion upon him, Natty stood tall, his weathered face a mask of calm dignity. His silence spoke volumes, a stark contrast to the emotional tumult surrounding him. As the trial began, Esther Bush stepped forward. Her body trembled like a leaf in a storm, grief etched into every line of her face. When she spoke, her voice, usually strong and commanding, quavered like a frail bird's wing. "Asa was a good boy," she choked out, tears glistening in her eyes like morning dew. "He didn't deserve this. And that man," she pointed a shaking finger at Natty, "he knows more than he's letting on." The crowd shifted uneasily, torn between sympathy for the grieving mother and uncertainty about the accused. The air grew thick with tension, making it hard to breathe. Dr. Badius, ever the scientist, attempted to bring reason to the proceedings. He launched into an explanation of the evidence, his words tumbling out like a river over rocks, leaving most of the listeners more confused than enlightened. Just as frustration began to simmer among the crowd, Ellen Wade's clear voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "I can't stand by and watch an innocent man be condemned," she declared, her chin lifted in defiance. Despite the angry glares from the Bush family, she stood her ground, her words ringing with conviction. Paul Hover, his eyes never leaving Ellen's face, stepped up to support her testimony. His words were measured, but an undercurrent of tension ran through them, knowing full well that his actions were further straining his already tenuous relationship with the Bushes. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in vibrant streaks of orange and purple, the camp descended into chaos. Arguments erupted like prairie fires, spreading rapidly among the spectators. The very fabric of their small community seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. Suddenly a hush fell over the gathering. A lone figure emerged from the lengthening shadows, a young Pawnee chief named Hardheart. His presence was electric, sending a ripple of unease through the crowd. The chief's eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the scene before settling on Natty Bumppo. In that moment, something passed between the old trapper and the young chief. A silent understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits. Hardheart's arrival added yet another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of the trial. Ishmael Bush stood at the center of the maelstrom, his face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The desire for vengeance warred with the growing realization that he might be condemning an innocent man. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, knuckles white with strain. As night began to fall, casting long shadows across the faces of the gathered crowd, the trial hung in a precarious balance. It had become more than a quest for justice. It was a crucible, testing the very foundations of their values and their ability to dispense justice in this lawless land. And there, at the heart of it all, stood Natty Bumppo, his fate hanging by a thread as thin and fragile as the last rays of the setting sun. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Just as it seemed the verdict was about to be delivered, a blood-curdling war cry split the air. In the fading light, dark figures emerged from the shadows, their weapons glinting ominously. The Sioux were upon them, and the frontier court was about to face a trial of its own. The trial of Natty Bumppo had reached its climax, with tension thick in the air. Suddenly, the camp was thrown into chaos as a band of Sioux warriors launched a surprise attack. War cries pierced the stillness, sending shivers down the spines of the unprepared emigrants. The once peaceful prairie erupted into a frenzied battlefield, the golden grass now trampled under the feet of warriors and settlers alike. The scent of gunpowder mingled with the earthy smell of the plains, creating a pungent reminder of the violence unfolding. Ishmael Bush's weathered face set with grim determination as he bellowed orders, his voice carrying over the growing din of battle. "To arms!" he roared, the veins in his neck bulging with the effort. "Defend the wagons!" The emigrants scrambled for cover, their hearts pounding like war drums in their chests. Wagons, once symbols of westward hope, now became makeshift fortifications. The creak of wood and the clang of metal filled the air as people desperately sought shelter. Amidst the chaos, an unlikely alliance formed. Hard Heart, the proud Pawnee warrior, stood shoulder to shoulder with the emigrants. His loyalty to Natty and the group outweighed the long-standing blood feud between Pawnee and Sioux. With fluid grace, he notched an arrow, his eyes scanning the horizon for threats. The taut string of his bow hummed with tension, ready to unleash death at a moment's notice. Natty Bumppo, the seasoned frontiersman, became a beacon of hope in the storm of violence. His rifle, an extension of his very being, spoke with deadly accuracy. Each crack of gunfire was followed by a Sioux warrior falling, their war cries silenced. The old hunter's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, never missed their mark. The acrid smell of gunpowder clung to him like a second skin. Paul Hover and Ellen Wade, their budding romance tempered in the fires of conflict, worked in tandem. Paul's strong arms lifted children to safety, his muscles straining with the effort. Ellen's soothing voice calmed the elderly, her words a balm in the chaos. Their eyes met briefly, a silent promise passing between them. To survive this together. In that moment, their love seemed to grow stronger, forged in the crucible of danger. Dr. Batius, more at home with Flora than firearms, found his calling amidst the carnage. His hands, usually reserved for delicate scientific instruments, now worked feverishly to bind wounds and staunch bleeding. "Fascinating," he muttered, even as he worked, his scientific mind cataloging the gruesome injuries for future reference. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the herbal remedies he applied, creating a nauseating cocktail that he forced himself to ignore. As the skirmish intensified, it became clear this was no mere raid. The prairie, vast and unyielding, had become the stage for a greater conflict between Sioux and Pawnee. Hard Heart, his face a mask of grim realization, dispatched runners with the speed of wind-blown grass. "Summon our warriors," he commanded, his voice low but carrying the weight of urgency. The fate of our people hangs in the balance. The emigrants found themselves caught in a storm, not of their making, bullets and arrows raining down like deadly hail. Ishmael Bush, setting aside old grudges, fought side by side with Natty. Their rifles sang a duet of defiance against the Sioux onslaught, the rapport of their shots echoing across the battlefield. Esther Bush, her apron stained with gunpowder, revealed a strength that surprised even her husband. She wielded a rifle with the same determination she used to manage her brood, each shot a mother's fury unleashed. Her eyes blazed with a fierce protectiveness, daring any warrior to threaten her family. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the battlefield in harsh light, two figures emerged from the chaos. Hard Heart and Matori, chiefs of their respective tribes, circled each other like wolves. The air crackled with tension as these two skilled warriors prepared to settle their people's fate in personal combat. Their weapons glinted in the sunlight, Hard Heart's tomahawk against Matori's knife. They moved with the grace of dancers and the ferocity of mountain lions, their feet kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Each strike was met with a counter, each feint answered with a dodge. The emigrants, even in the midst of their own struggle, couldn't help but watch in awe. The two chiefs' battle became a microcosm of the larger conflict. Their grunts of exertion, the clash of metal on metal, the dust kicked up by their nimble feet, all spoke of a rivalry as old as the prairie itself. As Hard Heart and Matori locked in their deadly dance, The fate of all present hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a knife. The battle raged on, with no clear victor in sight. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked prairie, Natty Bumppo made a decision. With one last glance at the chaos around him, he slipped away from the camp, his footsteps silent in the trampled grass. The old hunter's mind was set on a plan, one that could turn the tide of this conflict. As he disappeared into the gathering dusk, the sounds of battle faded behind him, replaced by the whisper of the wind through the tall grass. What lay ahead for Natty, and what impact would his actions have on the fate of those he left behind? The vast prairie stretched out before Natty, a sea of golden grass swaying in the warm breeze. His weathered face, etched with lines of experience, scanned the horizon as he put distance between himself and the camp. The taste of freedom was sweet on his tongue, mingling with the scent of sun-baked earth and wild sage. But fate had other plans for the old trapper. A pained groan pierced the air, cutting through the rhythmic rustle of grass. Natty's muscles tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle. He approached the source with the caution of a seasoned frontiersman, each step deliberate and silent. There, amidst a patch of flattened grass, lay a Pawnee warrior. Blood seeped from a wound in his side, staining the earth a dark crimson. The man's eyes, filled with a mix of pain and urgent desperation, locked onto Natty's. In broken English, he gasped out words that sent ice through Natty's veins. Ellen Wade, taken, Mattori, Sioux. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Freedom, so tantalizingly close, now slipped away like sand through an hourglass. Without hesitation, Natty's mind shifted gears, rescue plans already forming. The prairie, once a path to his own liberation, now became a treacherous expanse he must conquer to save the young woman. As Natty gathered his meager supplies, a voice called out, raw with determination, "I'm coming with you," Paul Hubbard declared, his young face set like flint. Love for Ellen burned in his eyes, a fire that overshadowed any fear of the dangers ahead. Natty studied the young man, seeing a reflection of his own younger self in those determined eyes. He nodded, his voice gruff but not unkind. "It'll be dangerous, boy, but two sets of eyes are better than one." Together they set out across the endless sea of grass. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the world into a shimmering haze of heat. Natty's keen eyes picked up the faintest signs of the Sioux's passage. A bent blade of grass here, a displaced pebble there. Each clue was a whisper of hope in the vast silence. Their journey was far from smooth. A stretch of ground that looked deceptively solid nearly swallowed Paul whole, revealing itself as a treacherous quicksand pit. The young man's panicked cries filled the air as he sank, arms flailing. Natty's quick thinking and a sturdy branch saved him, leaving them both panting and covered in foul-smelling muck. As night fell, a new danger emerged. The mournful howl of wolves echoed across the prairie, growing closer with each passing minute. The sound sent shivers down Paul's spine, but Natty's face remained impassive, years of wilderness life having steeled him against such fears. They found themselves back to back, fending off the hungry pack with firebrands and shouts. The night was long, filled with glowing eyes and snapping jaws. The acrid smell of smoke mixed with the musky odor of wolf, creating a suffocating miasma of danger. Dawn found them exhausted yet alive, their faces etched with the strain of their ordeal. Miles away, Ellen Wade fought a battle of her own. Held captive among the Sioux, she kept her wits about her, watching and listening. Every word, every gesture of her captors was noted and filed away. She knew her survival depended on understanding their ways, finding their weaknesses. When Mattori's back was turned, she tested the bindings on her wrists, her mind racing with plans of escape. The rough hemp bit into her skin, but she barely noticed, so focused was she on her goal. Back at the emigrants' camp, tension ran high. Ishmael Bush paced like a caged bear, his heavy footsteps kicking up dust with each turn. He was torn between pursuing Ellen and ensuring the safety of the remaining party. Heated arguments broke out, voices rising with fear and frustration. Some called for immediate action, while others urged caution. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on Ishmael's shoulders as he struggled to find the right path forward, his usual confidence shaken by the enormity of the situation. As another day drew to a close, Natty and Paul made camp in the lee of a small rise. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scents of distant wildflowers and the earthy musk of bison. They planned their approach to the Sioux village, their voices low and intense. Paul's fingers nervously twisted a blade of grass as he spoke of Ellen, his voice thick with worry and love. Natty listened, his weathered face softened by the flickering firelight, offering what comfort he could with his years of wisdom. Miles away under the same star-filled sky, Ellen lay awake in the Sioux camp. Her body was tired, muscles aching from the long day's ride. But her mind raced. She listened to the night sounds of the prairie, so different from the settled lands she knew. The soft nickering of horses, the crackle of dying fires, the occasional laugh or murmur of the Sioux warriors. All of it was alien, yet she forced herself to absorb every detail. As she gazed up at the vast expanse of stars, Ellen steeled herself for whatever challenges the coming day might bring, her spirit unbroken and her hope burning bright. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the campsite. Natty's eyes, sharp even in the dim light, caught a flicker of movement on the horizon. He tensed, hand moving to his rifle. "Paul," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the prairie wind. "We're not alone out here." The night air suddenly hung heavy with tension as Natty and Paul crept closer to investigate, their hearts pounding in their chests. The night air hung heavy with tension. Natty and Paul crept closer to the enemy encampment, their hearts pounding in their chests. Each step brought them nearer to danger, the soft prairie grass bending silently beneath their feet. The distant glow of campfires painted the horizon, a stark reminder of the perilous task ahead. As they drew near, the sounds of the camp grew more distinct. The crackle of flames mingled with the low murmur of voices, punctuated by the occasional bark of a watchful dog. The scent of wood smoke and roasted meat wafted on the breeze, a tantalizing aroma that only heightened their sense of risk. Suddenly, Natty's weathered hand shot out, gripping Paul's arm with surprising strength. His finger pressed against his lips, eyes wide with urgency. They froze, barely daring to breathe as they strained to catch every word of a nearby conversation. "It's Materi," Natty whispered, his voice barely audible. "And he's not happy." The argument between Materi and one of his warriors unfolded like a tapestry of deceit. Each word revealed a new thread in the complex web of treachery. As they listened, the truth about Abiram White's involvement in both Asa's murder and Ellen's kidnapping came to light. Paul's fist clenched at his sides, his face a mask of fury. The young man's body trembled with rage as he learned of Abiram's plan to sell Ellen to the Sioux. "That snake," he hissed through gritted teeth. "I'll kill him myself." Natty placed a calming hand on Paul's shoulder, feeling the tension in the young man's muscles. "Easy, lad," he murmured. "We've got to get Ellen out first. Then we'll deal with Abiram." With this new knowledge burning in their minds, Natty and Paul retreated to formulate their rescue plan. As the camp settled into the stillness of night, they made their move. Like shadows given life, they slipped between the teepees. Their movements were fluid and silent, a dance of stealth honed by necessity. Natty's years of experience in the wilderness guided them, while Paul's youthful agility kept them one step ahead of discovery. They found Ellen in a small tent on the outskirts of the camp. Her eyes widened in surprise and hope as they appeared, and she quickly motioned for them to be quiet. She had been preparing for her own escape, and now with help at hand, her chances had improved tenfold. The trio's flight from the camp was a heart-pounding affair. Every snapping twig, every rustle of cloth threatened to give them away. They ducked behind bushes, pressed themselves flat against the ground, and held their breath as patrolling warriors passed mere feet from their hiding spots. But their luck couldn't hold forever. As they reached the edge of the camp, a shout went up. Matori's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, and suddenly the night was alive with the sounds of pursuit. The chase across the prairie was like a dance with death. Natty led them through twisting ravines and dense thickets, using every trick he'd learned in his long life to throw off their pursuers. Paul's strength came to the fore as he helped Ellen over obstacles, never letting her fall behind. Dawn was breaking as they finally stumbled into the emigrant camp, exhausted but triumphant. The commotion of their arrival drew everyone from their tents, confusion and concern etched on their faces. Ishmael Bush pushed his way to the front of the crowd, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "What in tarnation is going on here?" he demanded, his voice gruff with sleep and suspicion. Natty stepped forward, his weathered face grim. "We've got a tale to tell, Ishmael, one you're not going to like." As Natty recounted what they had overheard, the atmosphere in the camp grew heavy with shock and disbelief. All eyes turned to Abiram, who stood pale and trembling at the edge of the gathering. Ishmael's face contorted with rage as the truth sank in. He strode towards his brother-in-law, fists clenched at his sides. "Is it true?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you kill my boy? Did you try to sell my niece?" Under the weight of accusation and evidence, Abiram's resolve crumbled. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he confessed to everything. Asa's murder, the plot to sell Ellen, all of it. The confession sent shockwaves through the camp. Esther Bush let out a wail of anguish, torn between her love for her brother and the horror of his actions. The other emigrants stood in stunned silence, the realization dawning that the true threat had been among them all along. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the prairie, the emigrants grappled with the consequences of their suspicions and the shattering of their trust. The world they thought they knew had been turned upside down, and in the harsh light of day, they were left to pick up the pieces and find a way forward. But even as they struggled to come to terms with this betrayal, a new threat loomed on the horizon. In the distance, dust clouds rose, and the faint sound of war cries carried on the wind. The Pawnee and Sioux were gathering, their long-standing feud about to erupt into open conflict. As Hardheart led his Pawnee warriors onto the battlefield, the settlers realized with growing dread that they were caught in the middle of a storm that was about to break. The final confrontation between the Pawnee and the Sioux reached its climax on the open prairie. Led by Hardheart, the Pawnee faced off against Mahdaree's Sioux in a fierce battle that would determine the fate of both tribes and the nearby settlers. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the waving grass. A hot wind carried the scent of dust and sweat, mingling with the metallic tang of anticipation. Warriors from both sides circled each other, their eyes locked in a deadly dance. The air crackled with tension, broken only by the soft jingle of weapons and the snort of restless horses. Hardheart stood at the forefront of his people, his chest heaving with determination. He surveyed the battlefield, his keen eyes taking in every detail. With swift hand signals and sharp whistles, he directed his warriors, his tactical prowess shining through in every move. Across the expanse of prairie, Matori cut an imposing figure atop his warhorse. The Sioux chief's face was a mask of grim resolve, his eyes meeting Hardheart's in a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. As the sun climbed higher, painting the prairie in hues of gold, the battle erupted. War cries pierced the air, followed by the clash of weapons. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of metal on metal, punctuated by shouts of pain and triumph. Hardheart's bravery inspired his warriors. They moved like a well-oiled machine, their coordinated attacks slowly but surely pushing back the Sioux forces. The Pawnee leader's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of what was at stake. In the heart of the conflict, Matori and Hardheart found themselves locked in single combat. Their weapons sang through the air, a deadly melody accompanying their dance of survival. Sweat stung Hardheart's eyes as he parried and thrust, every muscle in his body straining with effort. With a final, decisive blow, Hardheart emerged victorious. Matori fell, his body crumpling to the earth like a marionette with cut strings. The thud of his fall seemed to echo across the battlefield, a sound that marked the turning of the tide. The fall of their leader sent shockwaves through the Sioux ranks. As word spread, their resistance crumbled, and the Pawnee claimed a hard-won victory. The immediate threat to the emigrants had been neutralized, but the cost in lives and suffering weighed heavily on all involved. In the aftermath of the battle, a newfound respect blossomed between the Pawnee and the settlers. Hardheart's leadership had not only secured victory, but also laid the foundation for an alliance that would shape the future of the region. As the dust settled, Ishmael Bush stood on the outskirts of the settlers' camp, his weathered face etched with lines of grief and contemplation. The truth about Asa's death in the tumultuous events of recent days had shaken him to his core. With a heavy sigh, he made the decision to press on westward, seeking a fresh start for his battered family. Esther, her eyes red-rimmed from mourning, stood by her husband's side. Her grief was palpable, but beneath it burned a fierce determination to forge ahead. As they began to pack their meager belongings and round up their remaining livestock, Esther's hands moved with purpose, each action a step towards rebuilding their shattered world. Amidst the bustle of departure, a moment of joy blossomed like a flower in the desert. Ellen Wade and Paul Hover, their love tested and strengthened by adversity, joined hands in a simple prairie wedding. The ceremony, witnessed by their newfound friends and allies, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Natty Bumppo, the grizzled frontiersman, watched the proceedings with a rare smile softening his features. He stepped forward to offer his blessing, his calloused hand resting briefly on the young couple's shoulders. "You've shown grit, both of you," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "This land ain't easy, but you've got the strength to make it yours." As the newlyweds gazed out over the rolling expanse of prairie, they saw not desolation, but possibility. The untamed land called to them, promising a future they could shape with their own hands. Their decision to settle in the area was born of both practicality and a deep-seated connection to the place that had brought them together. Dr. Batius bustled about his makeshift laboratory, carefully wrapping specimens and organizing his notes. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he contemplated sharing his discoveries with his peers back east. Each carefully preserved plant and meticulously recorded observation was a piece of the frontier's puzzle, waiting to be unveiled to the scientific world. As the various groups prepared to part ways, Natty Bumppo found himself drawn to Ellen and Paul's fledgling homestead. The old frontiersman saw in them a chance to pass on the wisdom of the wilderness, to ensure that the skills that had kept him alive for so long would not be lost to time. In the fading light of day, as wagons were loaded and goodbyes exchanged, each person reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, the challenges they had faced, the bonds they had forged, and the lessons they had learned would shape their paths forward in the ever-changing landscape of the American frontier. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the prairie seemed to whisper of new beginnings and untold adventures. The vast expanse of grass and sky stretched out before them, a canvas upon which they would write the next chapters of their lives. The wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. As night fell, the stars emerged, twinkling like beacons of hope in the vast darkness. The prairie, once a battleground, now lay peaceful under the moonlight, a silent witness to the resilience of those who dared to make it their home. In this moment, as the settlers and their newfound allies looked to the future, they understood that their story was just beginning. The challenges they had overcome were but the first steps on a long journey. Yet with the strength they had found in each other and the lessons learned from the land itself, they faced the unknown with courage and determination. The prairie, vast and untamed, stretched out before them, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who sought to carve out a life in the heart of the American frontier.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.